자,
결승전 두 번째 경기는 대성당이고요. 24단입니다. 이거는 아마 오메가 팀이 선택을 한 던전이거든요. 근데 이 던전 같은 경우에는 솔직히 메소드도 정말 잘할 것 같은 던전이에요. 왜냐면 대성당은 요즘은 어느 팀이라도 다 연습 많이 하고 세기에서도 진짜 많이 하는 던전이라서 솔직히 이걸로 카운터 치기는 어려울 거라고 생각합니다. 좀 독특한 공략이 아니고서는 절대 카운터 치기가 조금 애매한 던전이 아닐까 싶어요. 자, 메소드 팀 같은 경우는 중보까지 끌어냈고요. 그 대신 오메가 팀 같은 경우는 중보를 제외하고 우선 주위에 있는 몹을 다 클리어 했습니다. 네. 자, 이 중보하고 같이 잡을 때는요, 최대한 중보랑 같이 겹쳐서 딜하시는 게 추천드려요. 왜냐면 앞에 정면에 있으면 스킬을 쓰면 정면 쪽에 되게 넓게, 아주 넓게 나가기 때문에 지금 중보를 잡지 않았네요. 예, 잡지 않고 그냥 전멸하는 이유가 있습니다. 네, 이거는 이제 이미 힐러가 1렘 앞에 가 있죠. 예, 지금같이 일부러 중보에서 죽은 거고요. 그래서 이제 다 대부를 받아서 여기서 시작을 할 겁니다. 자, 똑같죠? 두 팀도 똑같이 하고 있습니다. 지금 오메가 팀도 똑같이 하고 있고 이미 힐러가 먼저 앞에 가서 은신을 해서 두 팀 다 더 했다 보니까 두 팀 다 중보는 안 잡는 걸로. 예.
While you will want to actually kill him a lot of times when you're doing, live servers, when you're this practiced and this well practiced to be able to get all of those imps down right after Thrash fight, it's so much easier just to be able to have everybody die and get that quick mass res off.
So, a bit of mistiming here from Team OMEGASNIPED. And the last time we saw them play this, Luffy actually got there a bit too late. The DPS were too fast. They had to wait a few seconds. This time, Luffy is
메소드 팀 먼저 시작을 했어요.
quite a while they finish off the rest of that trash. Finally, they do manage to res up, do their typical big pull.
지금 오메가 팀은 많이 몰고 있어요. 많이 몰고 있죠.
Similar to what Method and A just did, but they're just that one step ahead. Once again, being careful to cut out of that Sanguini Panini. I was going to say Panini first that time. And they will be pulling Agronox here in just a moment. A lot of damage coming out of this boss in the form of just a dot that ramps up over the course of the fight.
바로 메소드 팀은 여기서 승부수를 던지려고 그러는 거고요.
During the boss as well, making sure that none of them reach the players, otherwise they'll explode.
솔직히 옆에 있는 오른쪽에 있는 쪽은 솔직히 위험한 쪽은 아닙니다. 거기는 이제 터지는 쪽 두 번이 있을 뿐이라서 크게 위험한 쪽은 아닌데 제가 쫄이 소환이 됐죠. 방심은 되고요. 터질 때만 조심하면 됩니다. 이미 오메가 팀은 벌써 7데스를 했습니다. 7데스는 의미가 없는 거예요. 아니, 4데스는 의미가 없어요. 4데스는 정말 다른 거예요. 지금 플러스 3데스를 당한 거는 지금 여기서
a bit of damage. They want to make sure they save that battle res over on Method and A. I mean, Rich does make a good point. There is a kind of a radiant green coming out of the tree, a lot of chlorophyll, as he said on the tree. We're really going to have to examine it under a Petri dish when we get a chance to. But back to the fight, Method and A now dealing with the first wave. Now, the thing we kind of haven't mentioned too much here is that Succulent Lasher. We talked about it a bit, but it's just so dangerous for the tank. The raw melees from that mob, as we see one spawn right now, is more than Agronox actually does on the tank. So you want to make sure you're locking that down right away. Not only to save a lot of that real estate on the ground, but also just to get as much damage saved for the tank.
Yeah, at this point, it will require just a little bit of kiting here and there in case any of the casts do get off, spawning those extra green void zones that you have to be dealing with here. And at this point, you are looking for just a lot of the tank smashes, the type, cycling through.
메소드 잘한다.
잘하네. Great job standing close in the effervescence.
제가 말씀드렸잖아요. 이 대성당은요 카운터가 될 수가 없어요. 카운터가 될 수가 없어요. 이 대성당은 모든 팀이 다 잘하고 공략을 잘알아요. 이 대성당 같은 경우는 또 쉬운 던전이에요.
On that 24 setting, a lot of times you are kind of being able to have that kind of counterbalance between being very aggressive with your damage and making sure everybody's staying topped off here. That's why you're seeing a lot of times people kind of dipping a little bit lower here, but when the damage is so predictable, it really makes sense to be able to do as little healing as possible, as necessary to make sure you're staying alive.
The smooth bark of Agronox has fallen as he does use a lot of tea tree oil. They move upstairs over to the rest of the imps here. Now, we know the kind of pull that we see out of this kind of imp area before Thrash Fight coming out of Team OMEGASNIPED. We've seen it twice today. They pull basically the entire room, plus the room before this, except for Gazerax. AoE everything quite well down after they line of sighted in the entrance. We'll see just what kind of pull Method NA is doing. It looks like they're rearing up for a similar pull as JD runs in there, gets a few moonfires out, and then runs back immediately to make sure that he can help LOS and use some of these mobs getting that Typhoon ready just in case it goes just a bit too soon. Now, they didn't pull everything. I believe some of the mobs on the side are still there as
어차피 연역 갖고 리셋을 한번 할 수도 있으니까.
Yeah, you have to actually deal with all these scavenger patrols, and it's kind of awkward when they're having to run over the Sanguine all over
바닥에
again.
책이
You do have
던져지죠.
to start dealing with a lot of the
책부터
books that are going out right over there.
저
So it's very
책을
important
딜을
to make sure
하지
you're kind of watching
않으면요,
out for those because they will have that expanding
커다란
circle of the
정령으로
silence going out.
바뀌어요.
You're also
그
seeing
정령
another death
체력이
going out on
장난이
the side
아닙니다.
of Team OMEGASNIPED here,
그 체력,
losing their
책,
Windwalker here. At 1% here, they're able to get the first checkpoint here, so they are able to kind of get that res. But as we've seen so many times in the past, when bosses are having such high amounts of HP, you know, slowing you down just a little bit more and just allowing the method snowball to really gain up speed.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you don't want to use the battle res there as there's the checkpoint, like you said, but just a ton of seconds lost. And, you know, this is, I mean, they're not performing horribly right now, Team OMEGASNIPED by any means.
죽었어요. 아니, 탱크 저거 준 거는
down on Method and as I say that, they will have the battle res available as it was a late death after the Thrash had pretty much already been killed. Thrashbite will be spawning in a moment, but they have to deal with Gazerax first as they res up and get ready to pull that in just a moment. Team OMEGASNIPED, as I was saying, you know, certainly not a horrible run from them, but probably the weakest of the three we've seen from them so far, at least, in the third cathedral that they're doing right now. Perhaps some of that fatigue setting in, or maybe it's just kind of a freak accident. We'll see how well they're performed. Their mass room pull here in just a moment. Gazerax has been pulled over for Method and A. This is a fortified setting, Jack, so there's a lot of damage coming out of this focus of destruction.
Yeah, the focus destruction can be so dangerous, really, to watch out for here. And of course, you know, like you've seen in the past, you know, you have to get everybody tightly stacked up and in together here, and as many defenses that you're able to really cycle through, they all have to be taken care of and focused on at this point here. 24 can just be so lethal here. You're probably seeing like the Flourish Ganir kind of going out for JB at that first one, and probably you start seeing Trank if we do end up getting one more here. Probably only lasting not too long here, so probably won't even really need to use it if you don't want to, but you're really not going to need it that much.
쐐기대회에서는 비전 수정
so
그다음에
JB taking advantage of it, you might as well be able to get it out because
아만투는 못 써요. 안 나와요. 예. 비전 수정 같은 건 다 옛날
not very difficult at all.
장신구라서 비전 수정은 제가 알기로는 비전 수정을 못 쓰는 걸 알고.
The main mechanic really here being outside of course avoiding, you know, the circle and the
970 비전 수정이면 이제 사기 아닌가요? 그렇게 따지면 비전 수정 970이면 아만투인데 완전 거기다가 아만투랑 같이 써봐 두 개. 그건 진짜 완전 사기지.
In BRH, the person needs to run behind or within one of those hit boxes of the bookcase. As we're seeing the scored full gaze go out, they do decide to hide behind. He will hit the bookcase first, spawning two of these tomes, which players will have to deal with and interrupt. And then here comes the AoE from the boss again.
Yeah, and really important to actually make sure you're getting the interrupts, the stuns out onto those books very quickly here, because they can put out an entire party-wide slow going out, and that can be extremely dangerous when you have to have the smash coming from Thrashbite here onto the ground. So thankfully, I mean, when you're having double Windwalker, they're very mobile and they're able to get out of it very quickly. But it does go to show, you know, they add control on this fight.
There's a lot of smashing and thrashing between these two bosses. Almost makes up their name every single time. Pulverizing Cudgel coming out again. Players do well to avoid it. He will now refixate one of the players soon, dealing with it, but likely he will die before that's even the case. Team OMEGASNIPED does perform that big pull for the third time in a row very well, and they've actually made up a bit of that ground, and they're catching slowly up to methods. So we'll see if they can kind of stellar perform the rest of the dungeon. They did have a bit of a hiccup last time, skipping the spider pack, the enforcers at the start, and then somebody accidentally did pull them, having to deal with that. Method now pulling all these imps together. We see the AoE grip come out of them right away. Leg sweeps go down, and a ton of damage coming in from them as they want to kill all of these scavengers and imps before they get away through the portal halfway up the stairs.
Yeah, you're seeing a really good job there to have the Ursul's Vortex following, of course, that leg sweep, then followed up by the Typhoon once the Vortex actually drags them back here. So we've seen some teams taking advantage of course, the
총원이 두 명이 딜이 똑같아요. 완전
knock those ads back, but the execution has been so strong by the entire team for Method NA that they didn't even need it. They're just able to wrap up everything in Vortex and stun and be able to deal with it so quickly and not even have to really worry about any of the damage coming out or any of the extra healing coming out from the Sanguine puddles.
So really big pull coming in here from Method right now.
끝나겠다는 뜻인데요. 완전 끝내겠다. 여기서 진짜 완전히 너희들을 그냥 압살시키겠다. 여기서 끝내겠다. 여기서 경기를 끝내겠다. 이걸 끝내러 왔다. 웬만하면 패스를 할 건데 웬만하면 패스를 할 거예요. 100% 넘어갈 건데 100% 될 것 같은데 웬만해가지고 패스를 할 거예요. 왜냐면 앞에 쪽을 패스하고
seem to kind of have it under control, cutting away slowly, making sure none of the sanguine heals Nalasha especially, but a lot of damage coming in the form of that poison dot on the tank from the
탱커는 연옥이 있어서 아마 한
seeing
번은
as
이제 과감하게
or Nalasha rather is actually continuously spawning a lot of
실력도
those spider
대단하다.
lings. You are seeing, of course, the Windwalkers actually helping out, adding those extra poison dispels whenever JB
여기 좀 솔직히 말씀드려서 실력들이 좀 더 실력
쓰고
하지 않을 것 같아.
at the 5, it does cap out like you mentioned at 5 stacks, so very important to be able to get those constant spells out. But as soon as JB actually got the dispel out on the 5 stack, he's E-mana is going right back up to 3, so that constant mitigation is so important.
대회는요
And also being able to
모든
rotate through those poison dispels to just make it as easy as
자기가
possible.
본섭에서 쓰던
A
장신구를
little bit of great support from those two Windwalkers as the presumably last set of 3 spider wings spawn Nalasha will be falling here. Method now at 94%. Should be just perfectly enough percent for the remaining bats upstairs that we will see between Domatrax and Mephistroth, the 3rd and 4th boss of the dungeon. That should easily be able to complete the remainder of the trash that they need, putting them to 100%. Team OMEGASNIPED has moved up here, doing the usual skip that they do, past the 2 enforcers and the orb caster, and will themselves be ready to pull Nalasha in just a moment. But I mean, this gap between the two teams is just not closing, Jack.
그 반면에 오메가 팀은
continuously going more and more in favor of Method NA here. Very curious to see if
보통
they're
저렇게
going to be able to
잡습니다.
have enough percent. I think it might be
몰진 않고
just a
중고만
little
잡는
bit
거죠.
over
왜냐면
5% from those bats, if not exactly so here. So they might just be in a little bit of a rough spot right as they take down
퍼센트가 오버되는데
Mephistroth.
I think we'll have to find out soon. We really don't have a choice, but I believe it's 1.5% per bat. I'm not really sure. I mean, if not, it would be an absolute catastrophe for the rest of the group. So hopefully not, because they would have to U-turn.
이제 어려운 건 다 지나갔어요. 진짜 어려운 건 다 지나갔어요.
Might be just enough time for
대성당 같은 경우는 크게 승부수를 던질 수 있는데 크게 없어요. 진짜 크게 없어요. 왜냐면 전쟁이 되게 짧고 냄새도 몇 마디 안 되고 냄새와 냄새 사이가 지금같이 아까같이 메소드가 지금 쏠지 않는 그런 구간 아니고는 진짜 이걸 틈을 벌릴 수 있는 시간이 별로 없어요.
As OMEGASNIPED is, of course, clearing out the rest of the trash leading up to Domatrax's room. You are having Luffy going down once again here, so very important to make sure you're getting him up as quickly as possible, expending that battle res, making sure you're having those constant dispels onto the tank. They're so important, so vital here. As they're going into the Domatrax, like I said, they just got into that first Aegis, which will, of course, reduce the damage you take, reduce the damage you deal, and the healing that you deal to the rest of your party members. So very important, especially as a healer, whenever you're dealing with the Aegis, or you're jumping in very quickly, you're taking that larger hit, and then you're stepping out, of course, right afterwards to be able to get your Wild Growth cast off. Maybe even you're applying Beacon of Virtue when you're in the field if you're playing Paladin, and then stepping out for your Holy Shock or Light of Dawn cast, whichever it may be, to be able to get the rest of the party topped off.
Now, we're, of course, hitting now that the 50% phase on Domatrax, where you'll summon the remaining 2 portals with the Shivara that pour out the Mistresses, and, of course, the 2 Fell Portal Guardians. Those need to be killed in time before they finish their channeled cast, otherwise they will summon a huge kind of Fell Demon that does a ton of damage to the group. These Mistresses are particularly dangerous, as they will do an AoE Shadow Whirl, punting players away from them. So you don't want them kind of getting into that shield area as chaotic energy is being cast from Domatrax, which is right now. You see the stun going up on the Mistress as everybody runs in, typhoons them out, making sure they're as safe as possible. Everyone hides in the shield, goes back out. Textbook example, textbook performance. They grab the 2 Mistresses again. One of them is banished, likely for Cephas proc from the Warlock, and also just kind of help with some support. Domatrax now dipping into a soft enrage phase, and that's all she wrote. Soon for Domatrax. Team OMEGASNIPED not too far behind. Domatrax already at 61% for them.
Yeah, and at this point, we've seen some teams opt to actually use Bloodlust, for example, on the 2nd Portal Guardians that do spawn. At this point, Method NA just kind of holding on to it here. And I was kind of surprised because we did see, by not lusting on the last boss of Lura until the 2 ads came out, until the 2 Rift Wardens came out, it did put a lot more pressure onto the healer to be able to keep everybody topped off through that phase. If you were going to end up lusting on a Domatrax, that would again have that similar
대치 휴일인가요,
scenario where
오늘이?
you are, of course,
월요일이
putting
대치
more
휴일인가
pressure
보죠.
onto the healer by prolonging the Mephistroth boss fight here. Something that I probably would think JB
이번
would be
주가
more
대치
interested in
휴일인가
doing
봐요.
just to make sure they're having that safety.
몰랐네.
When you're running with a double Windwalker, they're just so easily able to just neutralize these Fell Portal Guardians. I guess it definitely makes sense to make sure you're holding on to Lust as you're going into Mephistroth here, as you're seeing OMEGASNIPED not holding on to it and just burning it right now to be able to deal with the Portal Guardians.
Yeah, they're trying to catch up as much as they can. Method dealing with those 4 Dreadwing, the 4 bats that we mentioned earlier falling down. We'll see here once and for all whether it is enough percent. It looks like it is 1.5.
제가 지금 잠이 와가지고요. 새벽부터 하다 보니까 지금 솔직히 말씀드려서 지금 몇 시간째 방송하고 있는데 9시간 50분째 방송을 하고 있습니다. 9시간 50분째 10시간째 방송을 하고 있습니다. 있어요. 제발 여기서 끝나길 바라고 있어요. 근데 제가 계속 말씀드리지만 오메가 팀이 정말 잘합니다. 이미 유럽 팀들보다 유럽 팀 메소드보다 훨씬 잘하고요. 저는 솔직히 웬만한 유럽 팀들보다 더 잘하는 거 깔끔합니다. 메소드가 유럽 팀도 그렇고 미국 팀도 그렇고 공통점인 게 있어요. 뭐냐면은 그 팀 다 아주 안정적으로 해요. 아주 안정적으로. 여기서 메소드가 이기면 그냥 경기가 끝나고 메소드 팀이 이제 제가 그 본선 경기에 6월달로 알고 있어요. 본선 경기에 6월달로 알고 있어요.
range to be able to bait them out here. If you're running with a paladin, for example, because they are counted as a melee, it then would make it so that, you know, if JB was playing paladin, then it could have been dark, mid, or JB in that situation to get the spire. But at this point, as Resident Druid, it's only Marvin and JB at this point.
And as we've seen them do 3 times already, Team OMEGASNIPED has finished those 4 bats, getting that perfect 100%. There's a 15-second difference in deaths for the two teams in favor, of course, of Method and A, who was also at the benefit of Bloodlust here in phase 1 of this method.
오메가 팀이 갖고 나오는 던전인데 대성당은 카운터를 칠 수가 없어요. 제가 말씀드리지만 웬만하게 좀 대성당은 모든 팀이 다 잘하는 걸 알고 있어요. 그렇기 때문에 제 생각에는 카운터를 칠려가 못 봤어요. 뒤에 못 봤어요. 전발 뒤에 남아있습니다. 뒤에 목 날라오는 거 못 봤죠. 여기서 진짜 실수하면 탱커 죽어요. 탱커 지금 연합 죽었죠. Enter phase 1, so a bit of sloppiness there in that phase, but they do manage to restabilize and get back to the first phase. 실수하다면 진짜 역전 당할 수 있어.
Phase transition phase for Team OMEGASNIPED on the right side.
제발 그러지 말라고. 여기서 경기 끝내고 퍼센트도 차이가 안 난단 말이야. 사이트 들어갔죠. 차이가 많이 날 거예요. 야, 헤드가 잘못, 이거는 실러가 잘못했죠. 실러가
and JB doing whatever he can to try to soak one of those orbs that was actually heading for Illidan to be able to kind of body block that while they do deal insane amounts of damage. Try to body block it, make things a little bit easier for E-Man to make sure they're getting out of that phase there, but it can be so painful to deal with, of course, as you were seeing JB going down. But like I said, they have plenty of battle reses at 15% left and quickly
아마 본선 경기는 아마 게임장에서 안 하겠어요.
Team OMEGASNIPED, they perfectly got out of that phase. 62% left on Methodstraw. Methodstraw about to go down now for Method and
메소드가 우승을 하네요. 예, 2대0 러스과 2대0.
Remember, they pulled all of those spiders in that room, which some teams usually leave up, so they have to go all the way past Thrash.
지금 1%가 모자라서 1%가 모자라서 정말 1%가 모자랐어요. 뛰어내릴 주고 잡으려면 1%가 모자라서 1%가 모자라서 달리고 있어요. 1%가 모자랍니다. 지금 1%가 어디 가니? 지금 잘못하면은 역전 당할 수가 있어요. 그렇지만 뭐 10초 벌어놨으니까 한 마리만 잡으면 돼요. 빨리 내려가야 되죠. 한 마리만 잡으면 돼.
run down the stairs and of course be able to engage with the first thing that they can find here. Very close here as it's only 25% left on Methodstraw for OMEGASNIPED, so they should be able to get that extra trash percentage. They needed maybe 0.5% as they took down just one of those quick flowers.
It looks to me like they have indeed completed the percent they needed, and Method and A should, I mean, will be taking the series.
자, 메소드가 우승을 했습니다.